Hello and welcome to Trading Day, proudly brought to you by the Next Generation Ford Everest. Day 7, well, it was a big one. 5 deals done and the salary cap squeeze is upon us. So we're going to discuss it with our panel. And one of our salary cap squeezers is on the panel from 94. They sent him packing to Sydney with his peroxide hair. As I welcome Nick Dalsana and the man I'm talking about, Dermot Barrett and David Zeta. Welcome.
Ben, you're using the words of a much more accomplished former player. On your behalf, that is.
Oh, well, thank you, Dermot. I remember that squeeze well because you went out and they got some gold.
You got in.
77, yeah. Ben Dixon, welcome. As I welcome David Zeta. Now, done deals today, Dave.
Yes, Dicko. So we've had 5. So Jack Bowes and pick number 7 go to Geelong for a future third rounder, which is bizarre to say.
We're going to have to drill down on that soon.
Brodie Grundy gets to Melbourne for pick 27. That's another bizarre one on the surface when you look at it. Jacob Hopper and picks 53 and 63 go to Richmond for pick 31 and a future first. Jack Gunston gets to Brisbane for pick 48 and a future fourth rounder. And Billy Frampton makes his way to the Collingwood Football Club for a future third rounder. So 5 deals done, a couple of them quite the eyebrow raisers.
Well, the eyebrow raiser for me is Jack Bowes. Let's jump straight into pick 7. Did I hear that right, David?
You did hear that right, pick 7. So Jack Bowes gets to Geelong. He had about a fair bit of money for his next 2 years, about 800,000 is what we understand, and that was smoothed out over a 4-year period. So he now gets a 4-year deal with the Cats, and as a part of that deal, because the Suns obviously wanted to offload all of that salary, they offered up pick 7, which is Geelong's highest pick since they picked up Joel Selwood.
So you said smoothed out over 4 years. So are we talking now, so from what we can understand, it was 800 and 800 in the next 2 years as the existing. You're saying it's now become 400 by 4.
Effectively, yeah.
So why would Bowes do that when he's got it already? So effectively he's working 2 years for no pay.
It's a good question. Effectively, basically, Jack Bowes wanted to play more midfield time. He wasn't going to get a senior spot in the Gold Coast Suns lineup.
But he thinks he can get it at the best team in the comp.
Geelong have sold that to him, and he's accepted that offer from the Cats, and he wants to get there.
He's a good player.
Yeah. Is there a big feeling? The draw card was clearly the pick 7. That was the priority, and Bowes was the other piece to get that pick 7. Because I'm with Derm. Why a player, and I think we can understand why, and you can justify. I just don't understand why you would do that. You're guaranteed 1.6 roughly over 2 years. Why you'd be happy to spread that to get midfield time at the best team in the competition in its most simplistic form. If you can't get it at the Gold Coast, and yes, they've got Anderson, Rao, Tuke Miller, they've got some really good emerging mids, but if you can't get a game there and play in your preferred position, excluding Joel Selwood, who's leaving, how is he ever going to get a game in the best midfield in the competition?
I think the Geelong would say that they have had their eyes on Jack Bowes for a fair while. It's not just, obviously pick 7 is quite the sweetener, but they would argue that Jack Bowes is someone they've been looking at well before pick 7 even became a thought. So that's what they would argue, and that's what they've pitched to him, that they want him, that he can play midfield minutes there, and he's got a spot on their side that
so
he can earn.
He's 24.
Yep.
He's just completed his 6th year of football.
Yep.
So from a player's perspective, I'm just trying to understand why Bowes would do this. So he's going to back himself in and said, I'm in the competition at the Cats for the next 4 years. I will then get another extension on a contract and possibly play till I'm 30, early 30s. So he's actually saying, I'm okay to take a pay cut, because technically he is, to stay in the competition for longer and try and get more contract after that. The opposite is you stay at the Gold Coast, you get your 1.6 and then possibly don't find another home after that. Is that as simple as it is?
Well, the Suns, they needed, and Craig Cameron has said this, they need to fix up their player payment space and they need to future-proof it. So Jack Bowes having 800 over the next 2 years was not doable for them, and to extend it out to 4 for them, they just didn't see it was a reasonable investment for them because they didn't see him in their future side, whereas Geelong clearly do see him in their future side, and that's why they've offered to give him effectively 400 a year.
They're selling to him that they see him in the future. Yeah. The kid's got talent. The kid's got real talent. But if you want to call a spade, this lad doesn't have the requisite endurance to play in the midfield yet. He's 24. The question on Jack Bowes will be, can he find that now at 24? Because I think the kid is really good, really good. But if you want him to be a lock-in midfielder, he has to improve in the fitness side of things.
But I think the brutal side about it was the Saints wanted that to happen. They wanted Jack to go.
The Suns, yeah.
Sorry, the Suns wanted Jack to go.
Yep.
And to spread it over 4 them a little bit, they're not sure what potential he's got, but what did Geelong see that the Suns didn't see? Because the side...
They see pick 7.
Yeah. But in terms of as a player to come in and impact that football club, they're not on a needs basis, they're on a want, aren't they? We want to fill and top up our midfield. Does he feel that, though?
There's some good players down there that aren't getting a game in the midfield. I look at it, if I was Jack Bowes, I'd say my chances are better in Queensland. But that's...
Or at another football club. If it's not the Suns, I think there was other football clubs. If he wants to play midfield time, there's a lot of other footy teams right now that he would have had more of a chance to be a starting midfielder.
Hawthorn were interested, but Geelong clearly pitched a better sell to him, and he's bought in.
Lifestyle.
They sell it well,
They're doing it well. They're selling it very well.
Etched in my memory is that against Geelong, he sidestepped the great Gary Ablett and just made him look half silly trying to smother a kick. And it was a game which the Suns did really well against the Cats 2 or 3 years ago. That's etched in my memory. And sometimes you play a really good game against a team, they remember it as well.
They do. Now, salary cap squeeze from that perspective into the Brody Grundy Zeets. He got to Melbourne.
Yeah, so Brody Grundy gets to Melbourne eventually. So pick 27 is what it ended up being. Now Melbourne were trying to, Collingwood were trying to get a bit more for him on the way out. But Melbourne eventually do the deal. And look, we think the Pies are going to pay around $300,000 of the salary for the next 5 years. That's probably the main question in this deal.
Yep.
You can look at it on the surface and say pick 27 for Brody Grundy is way unders, but you obviously have to add in that salary component to it. And the fact that Graham Wright, who's their new footy boss there, has come in and he has seen deals that were done before his time and he has tried to move them and shake them up because they don't fit into what their future plan for the Pies is. So Brody Grundy gets to Melbourne and somehow is going to play alongside Max Gawn and the two of the best ruckmen in the comp.
I think we understand Wrighty's decision. Those decisions were made before he was there. He's trying to clean the place up and you have to from a financial perspective. From a D's perspective, and I'm quickly trying to rack my brain, you tell me another combination where you've had the two best rucks in the competition.
It's pretty incredible.
They've got along really well, Dicko. One's happy to play forward. I'm intrigued by how this works.
Gorney was massive in selling Brody Grundy to get to the club.
He doesn't like playing against him.
Yeah, exactly.
You've literally got the best two rucks in the competition. How do you balance that midfield time? One clearly has to rest forward. What are they like as a genuine forward? We've seen Max, particularly at times, go forward to the football and be a star. But if that's your, when I say primary, you have to spend a lot more time there than you have traditionally. That changes your whole dynamic. I'm really intrigued to see how this plays out.
Well, from a Grundy perspective, Derm, he goes resting forward and has a big impact. Gets scoreboard pressure all the time. So he'd be looking at it, go, bring Grundy in, play a dominant ruck role, more percentage so I can go forward because he's going to impact enormously. I
wonder whether you change your game style to accommodate for that. If you've got a guy of that height, and it's either it's Grundy or it's Max in your forward line, I wonder whether you can change your ball movement and forward entries as a result.
Max has dropped in clearance attendances this year.
Yep.
So they've actually decided... Yeah, significantly. So they've decided to take the heat out of him as well. So when he gets to go on the ball, like the St Kilda combination we saw with their two ruckmen in the last 2 to 3 years, when you go in less, you're more explosive when you are on the ball. So I tend to think Max is probably more your stay at full forward and relieve out. There's so many times late in this season we've just seen where Max started out of the centre square. Now, that's unheard of. If you've got the #1 ruckman in the comp, you start him on the ball where he can do his best work. But they started him out of the goal square. So I think that's something we're going to see more of.
Simon Goodwin said on AFL 360 at this desk, he said, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't think we had a proper plan that would work. Yeah, so they've clearly got a plan. They've got a whole pre-season to train it, and they've got two of the best ruckmen in the comp.
Well, can I just say, you made mention of, what do we think of the deal? If you had said to me mid-year, even though he was out injured, Grundy will be swapped for pick 27. Yeah. I'd have said you're off, you're rocker. But you're off. And to add to that, sorry, Benny, you made. I'm not going to steal your thunder because you said it off air. This is the most transparent, I think you said, we've ever seen clubs at the trade desk in relation to their salary caps.
And that's because the AFL have made that edict. They've put that out there ahead of the trade period. They've said it, that you can do these salary dump deals. There's a bit more of a softening of the rules around it. But to an extent, even with the Jack Bowes thing, they wanted a future pick going back the other way to make sure that it didn't look completely ridiculous on the surface.
So what impact does that have on Collingwood? Because didn't play a lot of footy this year, as we know, and signed a big deal based on when Collingwood was struggling. He was the heart and soul of that footy club. So what's the impact on Collingwood losing Brody Grundy?
Well, I think there's a warning to everybody that if you're going to sign these monster deals, that it doesn't always play out exactly how you think, and that's happened multiple times for a lot of football clubs. I think what it says for Craig McRae as a coach is he doesn't value the ruck in isolation as highly as some other football clubs, as the D's do. They've now got 2 of them that they are putting a lot of emphasis on and could possibly develop a game plan around to emphasise their impact. But what it says is the Pies have priorities in other areas, and what they've currently done to a certain degree, and they pretty much didn't have Brodie Grundy for the whole year. I think he played 4 or 6 games off the top of my head. They were happy with that look. They were happy with a bit more of that mobile...
Cameron and Cox.
Exactly.
I reckon my belief is you learn off your teachers. Now, if I can take you back to, and it's going back to the year when we played, Alan Jeans only had faith in bang crash ruckman, and he won premierships with that at Hawthorn. He coached Lee Matthews. Lee Matthews won premierships at Brisbane with bang crash ruckman. No great artists. There wasn't Simon Madden rucking for anyone there. And one of the pupils who learnt from Lee Matthews is Craig McRae. I reckon he just wants a bang crash ruckman. He doesn't want to be paying top dollar for them. But then I still coming to grips with getting my head around if there was one game that illustrated to the Magpie faithful that they need Brodie Grundy. It was halfway through the first quarter in that preliminary final against the Sydney Swans.
You almost broke into a bit of yab there. You were going.
I'm telling you, son.
I knew you were going to break into it. Zeech, Jacob Hopper makes his way to Richmond.
He does. So the Giants duo and Tim Taranto and Jacob Hopper land at the Tigers eventually. So Jacob Hopper picks 53 and 63 to Richmond for pick 31 in the future first rounder. So these deals were done. They got Taranto done early because he was out of contract and Hopper was a bit more complex. But effectively what this means is the Tigers have got Taranto and Hopper for 12, 19, 31 and a future first rounder. So the Tigers bring in a couple of players who directly address their needs desperately in the midfield. And the Giants stock up on draft picks, obviously pick one they've managed to get a trade for, but Hopper and Taranto come to the Tigers.
Are we all in agreement that this instantly puts the Tigers right back in the conversation?
Of course it does.
Of every team that had a needs basis in this trade, Richmond have done the best out of all 18. And they had, a couple of kids, Jack Ross and Sonsi from there. You jump 9 years of age to their senior boys who were just on the downslide.
Let's have a look at the Tigers midfield of what it could look like, or a combination of any of this. Nankervis is your number 1 ruck. Hopper, Dusty to come back in and still play that Dustin Martin role of the midfield going forward, or is he now just a permanent forward? Bolton, who's emerging as Dusty's protege. Tim Taranto comes in. Dion Pressey, who we've seen as their most influential midfielder when he is healthy and fit. Trent Cotchin, is obviously the older one that was probably going to make some way naturally. And you've got Jack Graham, who's one hell of a player. And I'm looking at Jack Graham in particular, and there's a couple of others. Baker's played a little bit of midfield time. Ross has done it as well. Where do they fit in? Like, they have got a wealth of midfield depth, which is a headache for the opposition. But a lot of these guys now are playing wing, half forward, possibly half back. They need to work in together to make this whole thing work.
But if you're talking about starting in the centre square...
Who would you have?
Hopper goes straight in. Hopper will win a best and fairest.
In front of who,
He will win a best and fairest.
So who's coming out?
He'll win a best and fairest.
We spoke about this off air upstairs, and it should be worth noting the Tigers kept Ivan Soldo as part of that deal, so they've got some tall timber backup. But you were speaking about Hopper upstairs, so you think his ceiling is higher than Tim Taranto?
I do. See that there? Balk.
33 disposals.
Three in a row. So what he does, he has tricks. He has sleight of hand. So if you're in a tight pack and he hacks a one forward, gets it going his team's way, he gets it forward. Next time he gets it, same situation, you'll dive to smother, he'll sidestep you and make you look stupid. Taranto's a really good player, no doubt, but he will always go bang and grunt and grind the ball forward, and not a great kick. Tremendous player, but there's not a lot of tricks to it. Hopper's got tricks. He'll put the ball to best advantage.
I need your starting 3 on ballers for the first bounce in 2023.
Well, just while he does that, to back up the system that Richmond play. So it is a bit of a handball dominant pressure surge mentality. Suits Jacob Hopper. So the way the Giants played wasn't necessarily, I'm not going to say an individual can dominate the way you're going to transition your football, but before Dermot gets I'm giving him time and I'm padding here for him, his midfield lineup. But I do agree with him on that case. He will thrive in that system of Richmond.
So if they're all fit?
Yep.
Hopper, Prestia and, flip between Dusty Martin and Bolton.
So you gave me 4. So they've got too many starting at the centre square.
Well, there's 3. OK, take Shai Bolton. Bolton.
Dusty could be one of the hardest matchups as a permanent forward. for the next 3 years.
I reckon he's
That's what could
harder when he
happen.
comes out of the middle, though,
Yeah.
because you've set
'Cause he gets
someone
the
in the
mismatch.
middle
Yeah.
for him,
Yep.
and he gets that mismatch. Yeah.
Walked into match
Every time
committee.
we've done the draft hand for the Giants, it just keeps getting better and better. I went from 4 to 5, and in terms of their pick seats, they've settled a little bit from earlier in the week where they had 4 under 5.
They obviously
4
had
under 20.
obviously had a lot, and part of that was to try and get pick 1 and to get Aaron Cadman, who Benny Waterworth, our draft expert upstairs, he says Aaron Cadman's virtually a lock to be taking at 1, barring the Will Ashcroft bid, obviously. So Aaron Cadman is a player that they've eyed off, and getting pick 1 was a priority and a big pitch they made. They did it, and they still have, as you can see there, an absolute stack of picks left over. So they've put themselves in a really good position. Probably Derm, you could call it effectively, and it's may have gone under the radar a bit, but they've effectively rebuilt or reset under Adam Kingsley.
It is a change of strategy, that's for sure. I mean, Leon openly has said amongst football circles, I don't want any more draft picks. I've been dealing with draft picks and getting in first-year players for a decade, and I've got to train them, I've got to get them good, and then they go somewhere else. Give me players who I know I'm going to have for 6 or 7 years, and I know what they're capable of. This is a brand new dawn for them. This is actually says, we know where we're at now, we're not reloading, we're starting again. New coach, we start again.
And a 3-time premiership hawk in Jack Gunston made his intentions that he wanted to get to Brisbane, and that was done today.
It got done. So the Lions traded for Gunston because they didn't want to compromise their Dan McStay free agency compensation pick. We know which was, I believe it was in the 30s. I'll have to double check that.
30s,
but yeah,
okay.
Basically McStay, 35 it was. So they got McStay, and they're trying to match bids for Ashcroft and Jasper Fletcher. So Gunston gets to Brisbane and he gets there for pick 48 in a future 4th rounder. So we all knew that he was going. He said goodbye at the best and fairest. He gets to the club that he wanted to get to, and you would assume he's an upgrade on Dan McStay. But I'd say Dal interests me because Dal's not sold on this. I think. Do you think he's an upgrade on Dan McStay?
So I'll go first, and then you can pull it apart. He's a better player than McStay. He's a more capable forward who knows how to get the ball. If you're talking about money ball, he gets on first. He gets the ball through the goals. He kicks goals.
32 times from 16 games this year. Jack Gunston, that was his return, which is fantastic.
And McStay's never kicked 30 goals.
McStay kicked 25 this year. So is it like for like? Yeah, I think that it is. But my broader conversation is, I don't know if the forward line's their issue. They haven't had a concern scoring. It's defending. So they were just under 100 points per game, the Brisbane Lions, this year. And we all know what happened to them again, and they haven't won a premiership, though they've been extremely close. But scoring's not the issue. It's team defence. They averaged 81 points against per game. You look at the Cats, the D's and the Swans. 67, 67 and 73 points against. That's their area of emphasis and growth from this group. They needed to defend better individually and as a unit. Yes, Jack Gunston can come in. They've got Danaher, Hipwood, Bailey, Cam Rayner, Cameron, McCarthy, young Fullerton. That bit I get. But what I do love about the Brisbane Lions, and this is not to contradict it, Hodge did a similar role. Birchall's done a similar role, and then you bring in Jack Gunston for the leadership. I love that piece, but the on-field bit, I don't think that's their huge area of growth right now.
So this is why you have the team coaches, you know, a book of coaches to throw it around. I would say if you get... I saw them, get scores on the board, but they laboured for scores against the good teams.
Yeah.
A player who can get the ball through the goals against the good teams, forget about kicking it against the bunnies down the other end. It's about beating teams in the top 8. And I don't think they could really do it all that well. They laboured their goals against good teams. He will help them get the ball through the goals without that laborious action when they go forward, and the rest falls in behind.
Well, I think the names you mentioned, Hipwood, Danaher, Rayner especially, that is more of a positive that Gunston goes there. He will trip over 50 goals next year. Because...
50? Over 50?
He will trip over 50. He wanted inside 50s. It wasn't about money. It's just going to a team where he's going to get inside 50. So you look at Hawthorn this year and they're inside 50s, and when Mitch Lewis wasn't there, or Kaczynski, he was the lone hand with Bruce. Tough role in a struggling team, but when you go into a team who get a lot of inside 50s, he's smarter than all those three. He's the scholar of that forward line, and that's why he's going to get 50.
He might not have the best defender either for the first time in a long time.
He'll get 3rd or 4th.
Well, exactly, so he can play that role, and the experience plays a big part. Now, what does it do for their experience? Because they're a rebuilding football club. with one man who's sitting at the top now in Luke Bruce, who's the only player over 30.
He's feeling a bit old now, Luke Bruce, older than he was. It's pretty extraordinary when you look at the amount of talent, or the amount of veteran talent they're tipping out. So McAvoy retired, we know. Gunston goes to the Lions. Liam Shields retires. Kyle Hartigan, they've parted ways with him. And then Tom Mitchell and Jago O'Meara, their futures are still to be decided. Tom Mitchell with interest from Collingwood and Jago O'Meara with interest from the Giants and Fremantle that's come pretty late. But Luke Bruce, the only player left over 30, it is an extraordinary amount looking at that graphic there of experience lost. And it probably asks the question about what it means for them in 2023, because it looks like, despite being a positive year this year or an encouraging year, they might actually slide next year.
Yeah, they won 8 games this year. I think 6 would be a good result for them next year. And let's not get into predictions about how they're going to play and the likes, but this is a complete reset to win a premiership. This is not about being competitive for the now. You want to do that anyway. This is about, I'm telling you, this is about the November draft, or the October draft in November 2023.
Does that draft hand give you confidence, Derm, that there's enough possible talent? So 6, absolutely, and the words that I'm hearing is top 8 are really good in this year's draft. After that, it is different. Doesn't mean that you won't get some gems, but it is different outside of 8. But 6, yeah, fantastic. 24, 48 and working your way out from there is still a specky sort of position. Does that give you confidence?
Well, if you look at that, you say, no, that's not extraordinary. But they've done the last 2 pre-season drafts. They've got 2 lock-away players in the spine of their team.
Is that who you're referring to there? Newcomb?
And also Blank down back.
Yep.
He's going to be the tall lockdown backman for 10 years. So I think that they'll say, yeah, if we can find another 2 or 3 from these specky picks, you got 6, put that in on top of Ward from last year. I think this is not something that they're looking at now and saying, right, we want to be competitive. Everyone wants to do that. This is one where Sam's gone, this is how you put together a premiership list.
We saw North Melbourne, and it's not the same situation, but they cut probably too hard. Have Hawthorn done the same thing this year if they lose?
There's always that risk. There is always that risk. So what Sam has done, what Hawthorn have done, is put in enormous stock in the likes of Mitch Lewis, Blank, Granger, Barras. They're big kids. They've got a big spine now. But we saw someone like Tom Lynch get hold of their entire back line in that game. So they look like babies against those. But, yeah, it's a risk, but you got a risk and reward in this caper.
Well, they overachieved this year in terms of the way they played. So I think Hawthorn supporters should be pleasantly surprised the next 3 years. We're going to be at the bottom and they're going to climb.